You're listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast.
Hello and welcome to a fascinating episode of The Whole Truth podcast. I'm Paul Armstrong. Daniel Mamadou is the Managing Director of Energy Transition Minerals. You might have heard that company mentioned many times in recent weeks, and with good reason. ETM, as it's commonly referred to, has a huge rare earths project in Greenland. It has been unable to develop the project because the previous government was opposed to it. However, the elections in Greenland look like they're about to get a new government, and as Daniel explains, he expects the incoming parliamentarians to be a lot more open to the idea of developing this project. Donald Trump said recently that the US will get Greenland one way or the other. It's hard to imagine how there could be more action, more manoeuvring, more moving pieces in this story. Donald Trump and the US want rare earths. ETM has a huge project of rare earths, and the Greenland people have just said they want their independence. How this will play out was absolutely fascinating, but one thing is for certain. If ETM gets the right to develop this project, ETM and their shareholders stand to make huge gains. The size of the prize is enormous. The question is, will they get the go-ahead, and what will happen next? Daniel gives us a very frank explanation of where they're at and where they're going to. Some of the audio is a little difficult to hear early on. That's because Daniel came to us via a link from overseas, but please bear with him because what he says is well worth taking the time and making the effort to listen to. He's a fantastic guy. He's very, very articulate, and he explains in very simple terms why he believes the upside is so enormous. Daniel, how does it feel to be in the eye of a global geopolitical storm?
Well, it is definitely a roller coaster, but we feel that our project is an important project for the energy transition, and so attention is needed to this topic, right? And we need to manage our communication very carefully, but at the same time, we feel it's important that this is a topic that is being discussed from all the various stakeholders, right? And understand the perspective of everyone.
So, Daniel, it's been an amazing 2 or 3 months for ETM. You've gone from a situation of virtual dormancy. I mean, the project was pretty well not really going anywhere in a great rush, and we'll look at that in a minute. But suddenly, the US elections come along, Donald Trump parachutes onto the scene. He declares that he's going to take Greenland one way or the other. Then there's followed by elections in Greenland itself and what looks to be like a change of government. You've actually gone from 0 to 100 miles an hour in a very short time.
Absolutely. And one thing I can say is that at ETM and at Greenland Minerals, life is never dull. Right? There's always something new to deal with. Almost on a daily basis. So we're used to that.
So let's look at a couple of the parts of the equation now and see where you're at and where it's going to. The Greenlanders elections a couple of weeks ago, what's the upshot of that vote and what does it mean for ETM?
So one thing we need to remark is that these were parliamentary elections, and they are followed by municipal elections, which is a process that is currently underway. Right? So we don't have a complete picture yet as to what does the political landscape look like going forward. At the same time, the party that won the election, the Democratic Party, now needs to form a government, entering into a coalition. And they're in the process of selecting their partners. So there's definitely been a change of government and probably also of sentiment. But at the same time, we need to wait and see how the situation evolves. And we're eagerly waiting for some stability and clarity, more importantly, going forward as to what does the political landscape is going to look like going forward.
So the media coverage following those parliamentary elections, as you call them, suggested very clearly that the left-wing parties or MPs had been reduced in number and would no longer have enough representation to hold power, and they'd been replaced by MPs from parties who were far more supportive of ETM and the project. Is that a simple truth?
I would give a little bit more color with respect to that. We need to remark that the second most popular politician today in Greenland, based on the individual votes, remains Mute Egede, who was the previous prime minister. So that's a fact. Other members of his party have seen their popularity decrease significantly, but Mute Egede himself scored reasonably well on an individual vote basis. The other parties that have raised to the top of the fold, so the Democratic Party and then the Nalarak Party, yes, I agree with you. It's fair to say that they tend to be very private business-oriented parties. Their agendas when it comes to social development, but at the same time, stimulus to the private sector tends to be more aligned with that agenda. They also tend to have similar views, not exactly the same when it comes to independence. And I suspect that this is probably one of the main topics that is being discussed during the coalition talks, although we have no visibility in that. The one thing I would say, though, is there's definitely a consensus across all parties, and I think heavily reflected in these elections, that there is a strong desire by the Greenlandic population to keep its cultural identity, to remain Greenlandic. And that is a message that has been common to every single party in every single manifesto.
So the coalition talks are a moving feast. That's the upshot, is it? That you don't know who is going to control the parliament?
That is correct. We don't know as of yet, and we don't know what will be, which portfolios are going to be assigned to which individuals from which party. But I think, and as I've said before, the previous government really maintained a very, very closed door, no dialogue, no willingness to compromise or even engage with us as a company. It was a very digital, black and white approach, and that was something that was really frustrating. And I said before, the situation couldn't really be worse from the perspective of having an open dialogue with the previous government. So we sincerely hope that any change actually is good from our perspective.
So you would have to be a lot more confident about the prospects of securing a permit to go ahead with the project than you were before the elections.
Absolutely, because we expect, and I have in the past met the leaders of each of the Democratic and also the Nalarak Party. That was a few years ago. To me, they were individuals that were, open to dialogue, open to at least engaging, which is the foundation of being able to find a compromise when a situation like the situation that faces us today is present.
Now, the previous government that you refer to, Daniel, and you say they had a complete blanket opposition to your project going ahead. Do you believe that, given the change in the makeup of the government, that their opposition to the project on the grounds of the uranium content will be changed? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, what we're looking for is we're looking for a compromise. We're looking for a negotiated and I would say a negotiated way to move this project forward. The opposition to our project was or is ideologically based, right? So
ideologically based. You say ideologically based because they said the project couldn't go ahead because it had a significant uranium content, or what they defined as a significant uranium content.
Absolutely. And their definition of significant uranium content is essentially the absolute lowest minimum of 100 parts per million. That's 0.01%. But, uranium irradiates in the Valley of Narsak naturally and has done so for millennia, and also many other parts of Greenland, right? So, we're really talking about background radiation. The introduction of Act 20, I think, which targeted our project, had the collateral effect of sterilizing the mining industry for Greenland. And I think this was one of the consequences that wasn't assessed at the time of its introduction. The Act 20 was focused on stopping Quanefeld. The previous prime minister said that much in his campaign. Okay, the IA party had campaigned on an agenda to stop the Quanefeld project, but in stopping the Quanefeld project by introducing this Act 20, what they really did was to essentially put a stop on significant investments and exploration generally across the entire country. That's essentially what's happened. So, our hope and our view is that the incoming administration should review their stance, and we as a company, we're also very open to review the project and adapt it to whatever changes are needed. And we've expressed so in a number of times with the previous government, but to no avail and no significant feedback. So we hope that with this new administration, we should have, a bit more of a listening ear to what we think can be a successful outcome, and putting this project back onto a path of development and obtaining that mining license, even if it is on variated terms. And we're a private sector company. We can adapt.
What are the options for reshaping this project, Daniel? I mean, uranium would appear to be the sticking point. At least that's what the previous government said. So if that is indeed the case, is it an option for ETM to produce a concentrate that contains the much sought after rare earth minerals, but also contains the uranium, and that concentrate is then exported holus bolus, uranium, rare earths, the whole lot, to the United States for processing?
Yep, to the United States, to Canada. There are a number of different alternatives, but let's say to a Western-based supply chain, yes, absolutely.
With the uranium in it. So you remove this issue that they kept throwing up at you, that you're going to have to stockpile this toxic uranium. You would say, well, the uranium will go with the rare earths. Absolutely.
And, this project is a rare earth project, but uranium exists in significant quantity. A suggested approach could simply be to, without repealing completely the Act 20, simply amend the level of the limit, right, from 100 parts per million to say 500 parts per million, and that should be done or can be achieved very easily without any major.
And what would that allow you to do if they were to lift that limit? Would that mean you could stockpile, extract the uranium at site and stockpile it?
We could do that as well. What our approach would be is to seek an understanding with the government and the authorities of what it is that they want to do. I mean, are we worried about uranium? And if we are worried about uranium, then a logical and pragmatic approach is to kind of package it together with a concentrate and export it.
Yes.
That essentially logically lowers the level of uranium overall, right? That is a proposition that we are perfectly happy to entertain. Alternatively, if what they prefer is to keep the uranium because uranium is a fuel, uranium has a value, and store it. we are also capable of doing that. So at this stage, we're simply looking at some feedback and some input so that we can pivot and adapt ourselves to a solution that makes sense and that satisfies everyone.
Donald Trump said a couple of weeks ago, Daniel, that the United States would get Greenland one way or the other. Quite a colourful quote. But do you believe that or have you seen any evidence of US interests establishing a position on the ETM register?
We have indices of US or, let's say, America-based interests on our register. Absolutely, yes. But, I've said many times before, we're a publicly listed company. We're private sector, but we're a publicly listed company. So we don't really control who buys or sells our stock. We have a certain level of visibility. I think it is natural that US-based investors are taking a look at us as a company as a way to express their views with respect to establishing long positions in Greenland and Greenlandic-related companies. We are not the only ones with a significant exposure to Greenland, but our main exposure is to Greenland and to critical minerals. And we know for a fact that there are a number of investment funds that are focused on acquiring interest in various parts of the supply chain, and they're looking for that exposure in companies that essentially operate in that supply chain. We're one of them. So yes, I would say yes.
Is there anything noteworthy about those US interests, Daniel? Do you think they're strategic, or do you think that they are purely just investment focused?
I think they're strategic, and the reason I'm saying that is because, we are not. We're a company that has massive potential, but we remain a very small cap. Our sector is highly specialized, so not necessarily fit for your average speculator who wants to day trade in and out, right? The liquidity of our stock is relatively lower than your average standard stock. So it is I would say expected that anyone establishing or acquiring or accumulating a position in our register would take a strategic view. As opposed
what percentage of the stock do you think is currently held in US hands?
I would say overall probably 15% across
15.
Yes, 15, yes.
Now you have a major Chinese shareholder on the register too.
Absolutely. So Shenghe Resources owns slightly under 9% of our stock as a single investor. Yeah.
So would you now say that US interests account for more of your stock than Chinese interests?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's a situation that's been like that for, it's not necessarily recent. We've had interest from US-based investors for a while now. It's just that these are perhaps split across a larger number of parties, whereas the investment from Shenghe is a single investment. So, but yes, we've got more investors from the US and also from Europe than we have from China. There's no doubt about that.
That all this manoeuvring, and which is probably an understatement, Donald Trump's interests and the like, shows that the size of the prize here in terms of your project must be huge. Can you give our listeners, Daniel, an idea of just how big this project is, and how it would fit into things on a world scale?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the Kwanefeld or Kwanesut project, Kwanesut is the Greenlandic word for the project, is a generational asset. It's a world-class asset. This project, as and when developed, would be supplying rare earth and also other products, not just for 20, 30 years, but for a couple of 100 years, no doubt about that. And that would seriously upset or reshape the entire supply chain of rare earth globally. Right? That's the statement I would make with respect to quantifiability.
So it would have a material impact on the supply demand balance globally.
It will have a material impact, and it will also have a material impact on the logistics part of how rare earth travel along the cycle of the supply chain. Absolutely.
So Daniel, what happens next?
So what happens next is the new government is formed. On our side, we are, as you may be aware, engaged in a legal process. So, there's an arbitration stream where the government of Greenland and the government of Denmark are defendants in essentially what is an expropriation case. And we have also triggered litigation both in the Greenlandic and in the Danish courts, so that process is also ongoing. Obviously, we would not need to be in that position if we were having a constructive dialogue with respect to solving this issue. And we are very closely monitoring the situation. In terms of what's next, it's really the new government needs to be formed, the municipal election need to take place, and all the parties need to come back to the negotiation table when they're ready.
What is the significance of the municipal elections?
Well, I think they're very significant because at the end of the day, we operate a local operation. We are guests in a place. In this particular case, the Navsac city, and so it is very important to have the local support of the citizens in Navsac and in the surrounding area, as well as, of course, the constituents of Greenland in general. But having that local support is extremely important, as it is for every mining project in the world, really.
The speculation and conjecture, Daniel, about what could happen to the ETM share price in the event that this project gets the go-ahead is virtually unlimited. I've seen reports from shared tipsters and the like, and you can take these with a pinch of salt. But some of them, and they're not alone, suggest magnitude of tens, even 100 times uplift in the share price. Do you think that's overcooked?
I think it is perhaps premature to assume that our share price can go up 100 times within a short period of time. But in terms of deep value, there is no doubt that an asset that can last a century or more, right, should see that value represented in its share price at some stage. We conducted, as part of the filing of the statement of claim, we had an independent assessment of the value of the project if it were fully integrated in the complete supply chain, and that orientative value was $11.5 billion. Well, it ranges, of course, but we are talking about $1 billion, double digit, essentially, right? So our current market capitalization is slightly over $100 million. You can look at what is the multiple, essentially, yes, 100 times. That's obviously a very blue sky forward-looking statement, so I want to qualify that. But yes, the sky is the limit, absolutely.
Finally, Daniel, maybe we could end on this note. If we can be a little cheeky, how confident are you that the incoming government will give ETM a ticket to ride here, the right to develop this project?
Look, I believe, without putting words into the incoming government and without putting them under pressure, at the end of the day, this is something that needs to come from Greenland. But Jens Frederik Nielsen has held the portfolio of resources for Greenland in the past. or has worked in that department, is an open advocate and strong supporter of mining for Greenland. I would derive from that position that things look good from at least the perspective of re-engaging and having that dialogue, right? And I think this will be a very, very different environment from the one in which we've had to operate over the past 4 years, where we encountered a closed door, completely closed at every turn, which was very frustrating, despite our attempts to modify the project, to look at solutions that would allay the fears of the various constituencies and so on and so forth. Right? So we certainly hope that this government is definitely is going to be more progressive and more open-minded and solutions-oriented more than anything else, as opposed to ideologically based. That's really what we believe is going to happen.
Do you have any insight, Daniel, into the timing of these coalition talks? I suppose with a view to saying, how long do you expect it will be before you can get into the offices of the relevant people and start these discussions?
We don't have any direct insight, but the one thing I would say is generally it's important for governments to be formed reasonably quickly and for, that situation of uncertainty not to fester, because Greenland is really at a crucial point. The government is going to have to navigate the new geopolitical situation, and the sooner they can come to a view, form a position, and start engaging, probably the better for them and for the people of Greenland, and for us as well.
Daniel, it's a fascinating situation. There's been a lot written about it in recent weeks, and I suspect that's just the start. Obviously, the project is potentially enormous. There seems to be no dispute about the size of the prize here, and the fact that it's essentially right at the heart of this reshaping of the global order as seen by Donald Trump, the Greenland elections. There are so many dimensions and moving parts to this story. It's quite a lot to get your mind around. I know that this episode of the Whole Truth podcast will be very well listened to, and I think your explanations will be really valued by investors and potential investors. So thank you very much for your time.
I really appreciate that you could have me on this podcast today, and really looking forward to the future, both for ETM but also for Greenland. We're very, very hopeful, very optimistic. We've had a change of government. We believe that the situation is going to progress for the better. This, from our perspective, is extremely positive. Thank you.
You've been listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast, produced by Resource Media, hosted by Paul Armstrong for Reed Corporate. Please note that Reed Corporate does not provide investment advice, and investors should seek personalised advice before making any investment decisions.